Welcome to part 3 of Tips and Tricks for the Beginning Access Developer. This is Access Lunchtime, AccessUserGroups.org, hosted by Maria Barnes. Today, Maria Barnes and I will focus on queries. Lots and lots of different types of queries, and let's see if you know about all of them. I'm Crystal, and share code, tools, articles, and videos on msaccessgurus.com, accessmvp.com, YouTube, and several forums to help you learn Access and use it better. If you want tutoring, I connect to you and teach you how to do it yourself. We connect and work together. I help whenever you need it. Usually sessions are an hour or two. I try not to saturate you with too much at once. I give you links and make notes. You will build your application. I just show you how to do it. For personal or group training, email me, training@msaccessgurus.com. Thanks for being here. Let's dive in. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the database that I'm going to be using for an example. It's keeping track of stuff for school. This is not the best structure. This was one of my earlier versions, but it got kind of complex, so I didn't want to put it out there as an example. We're only going to be using a couple of the tables, but the rest of this is out there also. We have students, and that's what we're going to import from Excel, and then we're going to shuffle it around. I'm going to show you some different types of queries. Every student has a contact record because everybody is a contact. So the contacts are the students, the teachers, the janitors, the guys that work in the yard. I mean, everybody has a contact record. The primary key of that is CID. And so in the students table, CID also has a unique index, although it is not the primary key. The primary key is student ID. When I put fields above the primary key, that means they're special. So CID has a unique index, and there's also a unique index on the student number. To show you some of the data that's in the tables, the students table, what we're going to be populating is the student number and just the student name. This is what they're called during class. Their full name is in the contact table, and we're actually going to put the contact record in first. We're going to grab the CID that got created and then put those records in the students table so I can show you how to do some different types of queries. The roles table is up there. If we need to fill out a role ID, student is role ID 1, and you can see teacher is role ID 2. The first thing I'm going to do is a link to the data that I want to use. You can download this PowerPoint that I'm using to demonstrate. Here we go. We're going to external data because I want to link to an Excel spreadsheet. So I'm going to new data source, from file, Excel. Before I forget, I'm just going to change this to link down here because I don't want to import these. And now I copied the path, so I'll just paste the path and then I'll browse, and I hope that's where I put the file. Oh, good, it is. So I'll open that. Okay. The first row contains the column headings. Most of you already know how to do this, and then we'll just finish. And now I have a linked table. We just did this. We just linked to Excel. Now I'm going to go down. Now what we want to do is we want to make a table with this information. Now usually I just import the table, but in this case I didn't because I wanted to show you a make table query. I'm going to create query design. I like to just close this add tables over here because usually what I'm working on is already highlighted. So I'll just drag it from the navigation pane. I'll just put both of these fields on here for now. I want to rename them and I want to separate them also because as you can see, student is combined and I want student to be split. Let me go back to the design view. This is the most time-consuming part. The last name is the first part of it, and then there's a comma. So I want to take the left of student, and I want to get it. I'm going to use in-string student. I'm going to look for a comma, and then I'm going to subtract 1 because I don't actually want the comma. Oh, it won't find student, will it? Student. Okay. Let's see if that gets me the last name. Oh no, I did something wrong. Hey, if any of you notice the mistakes, just unmute yourself and tell me right away what I did wrong. There it is. No parenthesis there. All right, there's the last name. Okay, now I'm just going to copy this expression and I'll zoom it up, paste it in here, take that off, and I'll just do first here. The first name is going to be starting, so in the middle of that, where the comma is, +1, but just because I don't know how many spaces might be between there, I'm going to trim this, go to the end, and OK, and let's see what we've got. All right, so there's our last name and our first name. The student ID, this is actually the student number. So in the database, it's called studnum. So that's what I'm going to call the name of this column. Let me change this to a make table. Although you can click up there, usually my ribbon isn't showing, so I like to just right click here, go to query type, and change this to a make table query. And what's going to be the name of the table? This is going to be temp student. I didn't actually make the table yet. I didn't do anything. All I did was save the design, the pattern. So now I will run and overwrote the one that I made before. And now I could do a save as if I wanted to, although I won't. I won't save this. So I'll just say no to close it. A lot of times when you're doing stuff like this, it's just a one-time shot what you're doing. So now let's go over and let's look and see what we made. So now we made this table. Oh, well, it doesn't matter what these fields are called, but I think I will rename expression 1 to be last N, because actually first is not a good name for a field either, first name, because first and last are both things you can do in Access. So it's good to stay away from those. I want to point out whenever you import, you're going to get 255 for the field size. It doesn't really matter here because we're going to put this data somewhere else. But I also want to point out that it's always going to be no on Unicode compression. So you want to set that to yes. If this was important, I would set it to yes. This isn't important though. It's just a mid-step. I'm going into the design because the first thing I'm going to do is append a record to contacts. So I need to then, after I put the record in the contacts table, I'm going to need to write that primary key into this table as a foreign key. So then I can put information from this table to other tables. So I'm going to add the CID field here and just save that and close it. So we selected what we wanted, then we made a table. And now we're going down to the next slide. Oh, I am going to be using aliases. So I did want to tell you that when you are looking at a field list, you can right click on it and go to its properties. And I like to just give them the same alias all the time, whatever I'm going to call it. I always call import tables I and stuff like that. So let me go to the next slide. What we're going to do now is add the field for the key, modify the structure. We just did that. We added a field so that when we append a record to the first table, we can get the foreign key that we need for the next table. Add records to the contact table. We're going to fill more values than what we have, but we've got our names separated out, and we're going to do role ID. So now we're going to create query design, and once again I'm just going to close that because I already have what I want to work on highlighted over there. We're going to add records to the contacts table. While I'm doing this, even though I'm not going to keep that there, I like to just put the contacts table over here so I can see its fields. So I know I'm going to want the student number, the last name, the first name, and not the CID. And in fact, it doesn't matter that this is joined because I'm going to end up deleting that. But now I'm going to right click here, change this query type to an append query. What do I want to append to? I want to append to the contacts table. Now I have an append to cell, and the student number is actually, I'm going to put that in the note field because the contacts table doesn't have a place for it. So the last name is called main name, and the first name is called name A. And then generally what I'll do is I'll see, oh, what else is available to fill out? Do I want to fill anything else out? Is human. Okay, that's going to be a true. So I think I'll fill that one out. Let's see, gender, I can't really fill that out for everybody. I know everybody is active, so I'll put a true there also. I didn't actually look at it. Sometimes I do. Now I'm just going to take that field list away. I pressed on it and I clicked on the delete button. So now we're going to run this, and it's going to add 22 rows to the contacts table. Let me go see if they're there. So I have this sorted in ascending order by contact ID. And I have a tracking field in here that automatically fills out when records are added. So I'm just going to select the first part of this, right click on it, and say I want to see all the records that begin with that. And there are my 22 records that I just put in the contacts. Now what I need to do is update my temporary table with this contact ID so I can move the contact information to the students table. And if there's any questions on this, just type them in the chat. We've got some heavy-duty experts connected. I'm sure they're going to be able to answer your questions. I'm not going to save this. So now I will create another query. I'm going to go get my temporary table again. And I'm going to get the contact table. Now it's going to want to join on CID, which usually would be right. But in this case, the CID is actually not in the CID field yet. That's what we want to update. What we did was put the student number in the note field so that we can temporarily link on this. I want to double click on this. I'm going to change this query into an update query. And what do I want to update this to? As I type, there's Intellisense, so I want to update it to whatever the CID is in contacts. I run that, and it says I'm going to update 22 rows. I say yes. And normally I would save these, but I'm not saving them right now because I already made them. I probably made them better than I'm doing now. So let's go see if they're there. Actually, I'm going to go to my database tools, to my add-ins, and I already saved these tables for how big I want them. So I'm just going to use my little Save Workspace add-in to restore all that. You can download that on AccessUserGroups.org. There's my students, and I have the CID in there. Let me bring back my PowerPoint presentation, and we'll see where we are. So added the records to contacts, check. Go down here, update temporary table with the contact ID, check. Now we add the records to students, did that. Did we do that? No. Let's see, wait a minute. Are these the old records? Oh, we didn't do that yet. Okay, so we need to append the records to students. So we'll go to the query design. Might as well use that since it's open. And get the temp table and get the student number. What I generally do is put all the fields on there and then change this to an append query. And where do we want these to go? We want these to go to students. And now I come down here and it's like, oh, last name. There's really not a place for that. I'll put first name. This student, like I said before, it's not the official name. What else can I fill out? Really nothing. The date they graduated, not yet. The note, I could put a note there if I wanted to. Well, let me just run this. And it's going to append 22 rows. So now those are in students. So now let me bring the PowerPoint presentation back. So we did that, added the records to students. And what's next? Oh, yeah. All right. Well, what happens if you run the append query more than one time? Now, remember I told you I already saved these queries. So we're going to try and run the queries that I saved earlier. Now, the students table is protected by its unique index. And by that, if we take a look, well, let me actually just close these and I'll open them again. If we take a look at the design view of the students, we see that there is, where's my index window? Where did it go? Indexes. Oh, there it is on the other monitor. We see that the student number field has a unique index, yes. And I generally say ignore nulls as yes also. Otherwise, you have to fill it out. And I only want it to be unique if I happen to fill it out. I don't want to be forced into making something up if I don't actually have the real information. So that's going to stop duplicates from going in to the students table. So if I come down here, and I'll just filter for my example queries, and I run this example query to append to the students, it says, okay, you're going to run a query that'll modify. I say yes. It says you're about to append 22 rows. I say yes. And then it tells me, oh, no, you're not. It can't add them due to key violations. And basically that means that's that unique index in there protecting me. Now, what happens, I already added to the contacts table. Well, let me do it again. Am I going to be stopped? No, no, I didn't get stopped. So what can I do in this case? I need to just delete all those records that I just put in there. So let's scroll down a little bit here. Delete the extra records just added. In the interest of time, I'm just going to copy this SQL that I already did, and then I'll explain it. So I'll create, query design, go to the SQL view, paste in, and now I'll go to the design view and show you what I'm doing here. So we're going to, remember I told you all my tables have the date added tracking field. Let's see what got added in the last 5 minutes. Oh, these 22 records. Now let me make sure. Okay, yeah. So I want to delete all those that I just added right now. 1226. So go back to the design view, run this, deletes the records from the database. Now let me bring back the PowerPoint. Next slide. I'm not going to be able to show you this, but I put them in here. I wanted to let you know that select queries, which I haven't really talked much about, they can be complex. If you have a numbers table over there on the left, just a table with numbers, 1, 2, 3, I start with 0 usually, but just number them sequentially, and that's the primary key. You can do all kinds of cool stuff with that table. Like in this case, I'm creating dates with the numbers. I'm just going to get the dates for the next 30 days. This is really, really cool if you're trying to find where you don't have data. So you can create dates and then see if you have anything for those dates. This is creating a trigonometric chart for a math class. I used functions to get the degree symbol and the pi symbol and stuff like that in there, and the radical sign over there. See the columns near the end has the radical. Yeah, I have a little function that gives me these things. And then I used just built-in functions to get sine, cosine, and tangent. Next is Crosstab. A crosstab is where you can pivot information. So let's say we want to show our students, but we want the classes across the top. So this is basically we're going to transform, and then we're going to add up how many points they got in those classes. We're going to transform the sum of the points, and we're going to select the official name as the row heading. Then we're going to sum the points. The course name is going to go across the top. And then we're also going to just show a column that has the total of the points. And that's actually the second column here. I'm done with the part for now.
We may end up only getting through queries at this rate. We did want to talk a little bit, Crystal, sorry, about your comment about Unicode. Someone had a question about that. And, I know they take up, if you do use select Unicode equals yes, it takes up some more space. And there was some question if you knew exactly how much space.
Oh, yes, I do.
Also aware that without it, you get only a subset of ASCII 2. But can you tell us any more information about both of those?
Unicode is really designed quite cleverly. ASCII, as you know, goes, well, the original one was up, 127, and then there was 256, and like big A is 65, and big B is 66, and then little a is, 97. And so Unicode uses the exact same numbers as the ASCII codes do. So a 1 byte is basically whatever the ASCII code is, and in this way, if you have a file that's saved as Unicode and you open it with like Notepad that can't, or something that only understands the ASCII characters, you'll just see a goofy character every now and then where there's something it can't represent. So now what Unicode does after that first subset is then it takes a second byte, and then it'll take a third byte and a fourth byte and so on. And what it will do is the first bit of the first byte tells it whether or not there is one more byte after whatever it has. So when it gets to the end, then it turns it into a character.
So it's really not double. It's potentially even more than that.
It's usually one. If you're using characters that are on your keypad, it's going to take half the space as it used to without Unicode compression. Because with Unicode compression, most characters will take 1 byte.
Can I just clarify something here? When we're actually using the Unicode compression, am I right to understand that then uses this particular, because there's a number of different types of Unicode, aren't there, Crystal? And that says that we would use this type as opposed to one which typically takes up 2 characters for pretty well everything.
Think of Unicode as UTF-16 as opposed to UTF-8. And UTF-8 has that chaining of bytes as it needs more bytes to represent the value, with everything from ASCII 32 to 126 being a single byte representation of a character. Once you get beyond 126, then you have at least two bytes, and as Crystal described, 3 or 4. I'm not sure I've seen a 5, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. But Unicode is, I think Unicode is always 2. If you do a string convert function, strconv, from Unicode to a byte array, all the characters take up 2 bytes.
And that would be UTF-16 you're talking about there, I assume, Mark.
That winds up being UTF-16. The Unicode that is used within VBA, it's all UTF-16. Everything's 2 bytes.
But if we select Unicode compression, instead of using UTF-16 Unicode, it uses UTF-8 Unicode. And that's what you've just described as being, and Crystal described as being the extensible one, but which starts and has for most things just the 1 byte.
You can save yourself some physical space on the disk and potentially in memory by the compression that would change it from what Crystal described as UTF-8. And if you've got mostly ASCII 32 to 126 characters in your text field, then you'll save space because you'll only use 1 byte per character for those characters.
Indeed, I think that clarifies.
Okay.
So I just put a couple links in there. One, I made a little Unicode character map, fun little program. I put a link to that. And I also put a link to my PowerPoint presentation in there.
I assume everyone's happy with that now.
Yeah, we need to move on at least. I'd like to at least get through these queries. We had some material prepped for going through some VBA, but we can always save those till another presentation. I think Crystal and I were thinking about maybe December for those if it didn't work. So I'm going to talk about a couple more complex queries, and then also about a definition type of query in Access. First of all, if you already have a union query, you notice that there's little query symbols. This one happens to be for a crosstab. This one's for a definition type query. These are selects that join together, or rather selects that they kind of have the implication that they join together. They don't necessarily have to. This one happens to be a linked or a pass-through query. And then this one that looks like the infinity sign to me, that is a union query. So when you go to create a query, and the queries that I'm going to talk about are these on the side: union, pass-through, and data definition. If you select a union query, it simply visually looks like it just goes to the SQL view. There's no such thing as design view for a union query. So you can't use that. You can only use SQL view. My suggestion, if you're not familiar with SQL view and how that works, is to write 2 different select queries and then switch to SQL view with the view from, let me go back to select here. So make your query in this, then switch to SQL view, then copy the view from each of those subqueries and put those into your union view. So here's an example of one that is already done. If you see, it automatically opens to what we consider SQL view. I like to add a little space in it first, although it will reformat for you how it likes it. This is the first query right here, and then this is the second query, and there's the word union in between. And the Other thing to note is if you're copying, make sure you don't copy over the little semicolon, because there's only needs to be one semicolon. In fact, there can only be one semicolon, and that's at the end. Then if you are going to have any order, that is at the very end. So what this does is it runs this query and returns those records, and then it runs this query and returns those records, all in the same record set, and orders them by the date. And let's notice a couple things here. You have got to have the same number of columns in each of your select statements. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in each of these. The types in each of the columns has to be the same. In other words, you can't have an order date here and an integer here. And then the names of the results is taken from this first query. So when I run this, it will run both, and you see it's called order date. It's not called whatever the other date name was, creation date or whatever. Let's see, we have 101 transactions here. If I looked at the product orders table, there is 59. And if I look at the product purchases, there is 43. So to add those up and you get 109 transactions, which is what runs there. Oh, a couple other notes. Oh no, that's the other one. Okay. All right. Now let's talk about pass-through query. First of all, the definition of a pass-through query is a query that does not get performed within your Access front end. It instead gets performed at the server where the table is, or the query is linked to. Think about, for example, this is a pass-through query that I've created here. So this is going for purchase orders and details. But those purchase orders and details in this example happen to be this table, which is linked with SQL Server, and this table. So if I'm doing a query and I'm querying something that joins those two tables, I can do that in Access, even though I'm connecting to linked SQL Server tables. But if I do that, I am returning all the rows from SQL back into Access memory space and then doing my join there in Access space. If I do this as a regular select query. If I do the work in a pass-through query, then I shove all the work to SQL and I return only the joined record set. And it's even more powerful when you're doing joins and filters. So in the particular case here, which I've already set up, and these aren't very big tables, so there's not a lot of difference in the speed, but this is doing an inner join on the two tables, and then it's also doing a filter on them. So it just returns just a few record sets or record rows in the record set. And so if I do that versus say there was 1 million orders in the purchase order table, if I had to transport 1 million rows over to Access and then do that, then I am talking about, Mark, I am talking about pass-through queries right now. So this is an example of a pass-through query. See how it has a little SQL indicator? And then I'm going to talk about how to set one up. This is just talking about, I guess, why you would want to do a pass-through query. When you set up a pass-through query, you do it through Create and the query design, and you choose pass-through as an option. And it's going to look a little bit similar to what you saw when you did Union. It basically clears out the design view and you've got SQL view in here. One of the important things to know is that when you, I'm sorry, the question is insert pass-through queries. No, I wasn't planning on uncovering that, Mark, but we can talk about that a little bit if we get some time, if you have questions about that. For a pass-through query, one of the important things to realize is the select statement that you use, and I'm going to use this as my example again, has to be in the format of the server that's actually performing that query. In this particular case, it is a SQL connection, and so I'm passing through to SQL. And so notice how I have a single quote around my date. If this was in Access, you would have a number sign surrounding the date when you're doing a filter, if you pulled it up in SQL. We do have a nice tool, which I have a link to on the last slide here, that is a SQL Converter. Let me show you that. So it is here on our Access User Groups in the main section. If you click the AccessUserGroups.org, and there is a tab called SQL Converter. And you can take Access SQL and you can paste it in here, and then you can hit the convert button and it'll convert it to T-SQL. There's a few other things like is different and a few other things that are different, and you convert it. There you get the single quotes. So if you don't remember the syntax or don't know it, you can use this tool. I do know it, and I like to just actually test it in SQL first, in SQL Server Management Studio, but that's, up to you. So you have to have it in SQL format. Let me go back to my query. You put the SQL in, and then the other thing you need is the ODBC connection string. And there's a couple ways of getting that. You can get it through the link table manager by going in and selecting your linked table and the server part, and then going into edit, and you just copy it from there. You can do a table defs query in VBA and do something like, and then the name of your linked table, you put the name in there, and connect, and you can get it through there and copy that. So those are two good ways. You can also do it through the properties window of a table data definition, in design mode rather. That's another option. So we did have a question about how you insert in a pass-through. Basically, pass-through queries allow you to do anything that you have permission to on the server that you're linking to, as long as it's in that server's format. So if you're talking about SQL Server, we can do T-SQL based things. So you could do an insert statement, just like you could do an update statement. Pass-through itself means the server is done, or the query is done on the server. You can effectively do almost all the same types of access queries in that server, but you have to make sure you use their language, which sometimes is very similar and sometimes it's slightly different. So does that answer your question, Mark?
Well, I was just going to point out a performance issue. Every time that you would have an insert statement in your pass-through query, it will do a commit of each record. So it may be very difficult to get good performance when doing inserts if you have multiple insert statements. You can work around that by having multiple values clauses for a single insert statement, and you're then limited to 64K of string length for the pass-through query. But all of that one insert statement will be a single commit up on SQL Server. It saves a ton of time avoiding all of those commits, which is analogous to what we would do with begin trans and commit down within Access.
So are you saying that insert off of a select query is different, or what?
Yes. If
Yeah,
your
I
if your
don't mean
query,
to interrupt. I heard that too, Maria. Basically, what Mark said is it's going to go record by record, not in a batch.
yes,
Yes, but my question here, I'm going to interrupt again. Mark, when you say an insert query, there's loads of different ways of using insert. You can insert by values, as you mentioned. You can insert, presumably, across from a linked table into the Access database. What are you talking about here when you say it works record by record?
Yeah, because I think you're only talking about if the select query is based on Access. I think that if your select query is based on SQL data, that should not happen.
that is correct. If the data is already up on the SQL Server database,
Yes.
then that's not an issue.
Right.
But if you are inserting data from Microsoft Access
Yes.
through a pass-through query, that it does matter how you write your pass-through queries, that multiple insert statements will cause a commit for each insert statement.
That
And
makes sense. Yep.
And that if you're not using a pass-through, but having the SQL Server table as the destination of an append query, it will also do a row-by-row commit.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way that I've seen around this workaround is to have a single insert statement with multiple values clauses. If you're pushing the data from Access up to SQL Server.
Okay, good point to bring up. Something to be aware of. And, it may not be an issue if you're talking about small amounts, but obviously the larger amount of rows you get and or the more in use your server is. Because every commit does, like you said, require overhead and locks for a certain short time and that kind of stuff. So you can get more interference the more commits you get. So we don't have a lot of time left here, but I do want to talk briefly about data definition queries. Those look like a little design icon. This particular one, again, looks like it opens right to SQL. It happens to alter a table and add a column. To start it, you use the create query design and then data definition, and it basically gives you a freebie to type SQL. So this makes use of something called DDL language. Some of the comments or types of things you can do is to create, alter, or drop table, for instance. You can add, drop, or alter columns or indexes or constraints. To do this type of query, in general, you have to, thank you, Crystal, for putting that out there. You generally have to have the tables locked to run many of the DDL queries or the data definition queries. So this is something that you have to be aware of. If you attempt to run it and it's not locked, it will tell you so that it can't get a lock on it. So for this one, for example, if we want to just see it run, we have a table. It is called contacts, and looks like category 2 has already been added to that. And so let's add category 3 now and run. Oh, it cannot lock it because it's in use. It's open, right? So I'm going to close that and then run. I think it did it. Yep, there's category 3. Why would you want to do this? A lot of people use this in the case of if you're trying to do data modifications and use types of queries to make modifications to an existing database. Let me go back to our slides. We'll cover those another time. Here's a couple links for you. The first 2 presentations that we did from this fall and this winter, part 1 and 2, here's some links to that. Here's a link to Access shortcut keys in QAT, to the SQL Converter on the Access User Groups, and Crystal and I's contact info. Did I get all of it, Crystal, or did I miss one of the links that I need to insert?
I don't know. It's too late now. I think you have enough.
Yeah. Okay.
You should open it up and let everybody say hi to each other.
Sure.
So everybody turn your mics on, say hello. We have some new people here.
If you have questions or anything at this point, feel free to.
And I want to point out, I did it right before the meeting, but John Spencer, John, say hello. Tell people who you are. I haven't seen you in forever.
Well, I'm a retired Access developer.
And MVP.
I'm multiple years MVP, yeah. I kind of dropped off the map since I retired. I did some consulting after I retired from the university. But the only thing that confuses me today, I understood most of what was going on, but I thought this was for beginning Access developers, and I was curious. And today was not for beginners.
You know,
well, it was supposed to be, it's supposed to be an introduction to queries, because if you're a beginning Access or an in-depth view of queries, because if you're a beginning Access developer, you may not know, and the key is developer, not Microsoft Access user, right? So you are developing an application in Microsoft Access. So you probably used Access to write just regular select and where queries and that kind of stuff. So we really didn't cover that. This is a little bit more in depth about queries today.
And, okay, so I'm going to just call on a couple people to say something. Charles, would you say hello? And Charles.
Hello, thank you very much. I'm multitasking, but I'm still at work, but thank you.
Yeah, tell us what you do with Access, and you're an Excel user, aren't you?
Mostly Access, small company that evaluates social service programs. I build simple databases for people to keep track of their clients and data, and then I'm the one that collects it all and uses queries and stuff to generate reports. So this is always useful stuff and little tips and new ways to do queries. So I really appreciate it.
All right, wonderful. Lisa, can you unmute and say hello?
Hello, yes, Lisa from Germany. Good evening from here.
Hi, Lisa.
Hi.
So you're a Word MVP?
Yes, I'm Word MVP. I'm a trainer, but for all Office products. Word, Excel, Access, Outlook, and PowerPoint.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Alex doesn't even have a microphone picture next to his name. Okay.
You probably can't then.
All right, Barbara Gressman, you're next.
Hi, Chris. Access is kind of my hobby. Crystal helped me years ago in 2007, and I've been dabbling with it for volunteer organizations since. I'm currently in a retirement community and have a couple of databases for that, but I'm a rank beginner still. I'm a dinosaur.
Well, we're really glad you joined us. I always remember Dinosaur. Barbara was one of my first subscribers back on YouTube, like a long, long time ago, more than 10 years ago. We used to be able to know who our subscribers were, and her name was Comp Dinosaur. That's what I remember. Peter, would you say hello?
Oh, yeah, it's Peter from the UK. The theme enthusiast. Got to drop that in, haven't I? Just a couple of thoughts on shortcut keys when using queries. Alt QR will, Alt QR runs a query. Alt VD switches to design mode. Alt VQ switches to SQL mode. What's the other one? Not remember. So
are those on your shortcut link, Crystal?
No, because I don't think so. I think what he's doing is using the Alt keys that actually correspond to the menu items, right, Peter?
Quite possibly, but they work.
Definitely. That's definitely it. And the one you're missing there, Peter, I think, is Alt VS for Sierra, which is to show the data. So if you're
That's it. Yeah.
if you're in a select query, it's the same as QR. But if it's an action query, it shows you what would happen rather than a QR, which actually goes off and does it.
Right, because the Alt gets you onto the ribbon, and then once you press the Alt key, then you'll see everything on the ribbon has a letter next to it. So then you can just navigate yourself once you press Alt, and look, if you have a ribbon command that you like a lot, go ahead and press Alt, Maria.
I just did it.
Yeah, see, and then you can learn the shortcut for something that you use a lot.
That's almost right. There's one correction to that. Alt allows you to go onto the ribbon. It doesn't thought that if you select one of the letters which are on the ribbon, it will take you to the ribbon. But there are other things that an Alt key can do and just take you onto the ribbon.
Oh, no, they're not. That's it. That's all it can do.
Oh, yes, there are.
Okay,
right,
who hasn't
so-
said anything? Richard. Oh, you don't have a microphone. John, John Vizio. We're very, very lucky to have the world expert for Vizio with us. John, unmute yourself and say hello. Oh, did you? All right.
Let's put a message through, Crystal, saying microphone off due to excessive background noise.
Oh, okay. Well, that's all
Sorry,
right.
this is Richard. I think hopefully you can hear me. I had to mute because I was in another meeting, but I just wanted to say hello. I'm a CPA from the Washington, D.C. area, and I got involved with Access because one of my clients was doing something that required data analytics that couldn't be done by the IT department, and I was asked to audit it. And I thought, okay, I can do this. And I just became fascinated. I realized that there was way more to this than just, like spelunking an Excel spreadsheet. And I kind of became an enthusiast myself and started using it for my own practice as a CPA, and I really enjoyed it.
Wonderful. Well, we're real happy to have you here. Eric, do you want to unmute and say hello? Don? Eric? Okay, here comes Don.
Don Sadler, yeah. I'm in the same retirement community with Barbara, so she recommended I check the site out today, and I'm happy to be here. I'm an oldie. I first used Access version 1.0. Was a SQL Server backend and built a database down in CIA. You can imagine the problems we had with using the very first version. So my knowledge is a little bit outdated, but I enjoy using it, and I'm kind of a hobby for me.
We're real glad you're here, and it's a good thing that the two of you are in the same area so you can talk to each other about the most fantastic product in the world.
Oh, we do. We all the time.
Wonderful. Let's see, who hasn't said anything yet? Colin, you said something before the meeting, but you haven't. And Hal, David. Oh, you don't have a microphone. Oh. Okay. Who else wants to say hello that hasn't spoken yet?
I'll have a quick response. Oh, unless anyone else is still talking. Oh, sorry, I thought it was a bit of a gap there.
All right, okay. Adrian, fill the space.
I wanted to come back.
You're the birthday boy. You get to do what you want.
I always get to. Oops. Anyway, I wanted to get back to Philip Foulis, who said only true programmers remember ASCII values for characters. And I thought, yeah, I can work with that. That sounds good. And then I think it's John, the Vizio MVP, came along afterwards. That was an even better response. Dinosaur programmers know it in EBCDIC. I don't know if anyone goes back to the old IBM.
Oh, yeah, that's reaching.
I do.
Yeah. I thought ASCII was a bit newfangled back in the day.
So I do have up here also a link to next month's presentation. We're looking forward to that. If you like today's presentation, feel free to join us next month. as always, if you have any other questions, you can take a look at or contact either Crystal or I. We will be posting this to YouTube eventually, and also a link to the slides from the presentation. I'll probably pull out the VBA slides from this and just put the query slides in the PDF that we have also on YouTube. I'll also have a blog post on our website. I'll create a new one. So if you go AccessUsersGroups.org/lunch and then go under blog, we'll put a link to the May presentation. Or not to today's August presentation, similar to the way I did before. And that'll be even before the YouTube video gets finished. So thank you everybody for joining us.
Thanks for joining us today. Coming up in September on Tuesday the 28th, Colin Riddington, Isla Dogs, shows us code to automatically resize forms and their controls. He uses a modified version of free open source code by Jamie Cernick. In October, on Tuesday the 26th, Maria Barnes shows us the new date-time data type that was recently added to Access. In November, on Tuesday the 30th, Peter Cole will show us the easy way to do 32 to 64-bit conversion. In December, on Tuesday the 28th, Maria and I are back with part 4 in this series for beginning Access developers. The focus will be VBA and its environment. If you don't know everything, then you definitely want to come. And if you're an expert, come help us answer questions in the chat. These are excellent presentations you won't want to miss.